Spring's going to be leading the conversation and sharing her expertise and her farm story, but she's made really clear from step one that she wants to hear from you all as well. Again, this is about learning from each other. With that in mind, we'd love it if folks feel comfortable, if you could turn your videos on. We'd love to see your faces and have a chance to interact in that way. We really encourage you to ask questions as Spring is giving her presentation. And then a little bit before noon or so, we're going to break out into smaller groups. Thank you, Zach. It's good to see you. And having more intimate conversations. And throughout today's discussion, we really want to create a great space for producers of all different kinds of crop types from all different regions. And as we engage in conversation, I hope we can do so with respect for others, by listening with curiosity. Let's speak from our own personal experiences, and let's allow time for others to share. I just want to recognize today that all of you folks that we have gathered here really have care for the land in common, and thank you for all the incredible work you do. Yes, great. Love seeing folks coming in on the video so that we can have a more conversational approach. So also with that in mind, I thought it would be great to practice the chat. And as Dominica, just said, feel free to introduce yourself, but maybe just as a test to make sure everyone can use the chat. If you could type in what your favorite spring crop or, spring thing happening on your farm is right now, so that we can make sure everyone knows how to use the chat. I'm gonna go with an easy one. Excited to see those peas popping up. Spring garlic, love it. Vetch, yes. All right. Let's see. And I also thought it would be fun for folks to hear who else is in the room. And so I've got a quick poll that I will get going so that we can figure out who's in the room. I'm going to launch this poll. So check it out and please answer for us. I'll just let it roll for a moment. All right, one more moment. All right, I'm going to share the results. Can you all see that? Yeah, so we've got a few Central Oregon folks in North Willamette Valley, Mid Willamette Valley so far. 75% of folks are growing vegetables. We've got 50% with livestock, some fruit growers, and forage or hay as well. Great. So as you can see, this is a nice little snapshot of all the folks that we have in Oregon Climate and Agriculture Networks space, which makes these statewide conversations really interesting and fun. So one last thing, I'll just go through our outline and then we can get rolling with Spring. Spring is going to provide a snapshot of what's happening on her farm today. And as I sent some of you all the questions that we'd be talking about ahead of the meeting, and I'll put that in the chat here in just a moment, or if you have that handy, Dominica, I don't know if you do, could throw that in there again. But we're going to go through, just the basic context of Spring's farm and some of the things she's doing around community resilience, economic resilience, and ecological resilience. And then we're going to go into these breakout rooms, and we've got some guidelines for breakout rooms. We've got a nice size group here, but I think it'll be great to break out into smaller rooms to get into things a little bit more. And then that'll happen a little bit before, like right around noon. Then we'll come back together, talk about what we heard in those breakout rooms, and then kind of close things out. So with that, I'm excited to introduce Spring Alaska Schreiner. She is the principal ecologist and indigenous agriculturalist with Sakari Farms. She's been such a great partner to OrCAN since we have been working to move beyond policy over the past 2 years, and a really important advisor to me and partner. So excited to get things going. Thank you so much for joining us, Spring.
Yeah, thank you for having me today. It stopped snowing for a second, so the sun's out, and yeah, honored to be here today and learn more about everyone who's on the call today and the things that we have in common and how we can help each other.
Great. Would you like to get started? Should I show some of your slides? Is that how you'd like to get going? Great.
Yeah, let's do a little slide. I'll do an introduction to, I'm a Nupiaq. I'm from Alaska originally. My tribe is from up there, the Kingacommute. We're from Nome. And I started this farm. We purchased this land about 4 years ago. And it's a tribal food education farm. So we focus on food sovereignty. So we focus on tribal food production. We're trying to bring back our traditional foods using ancestral tribal seed from all over Turtle Island. We grow the food out. We also have a value-added food product business that we make shelf-stable foods that are approved by FDA in there. We provide a lot of on-farm education for tribes and non-natives, so through Oregon Farm to School program. Black Butte Elementary comes out. There's just a lot of COCC, OSU, a lot of on-farm classes that we teach hands-on to kind of get everyone physically engaged in the environment. I serve on 8 or 9 different boards around the state, focusing on BIPOC, DEI, and climate change-based policy work. I'm trying to make sure that we're represented here in Deschutes County. Our farming climate is different. It's a lot of hay and a few small farms here and there. There's some pretty cool stuff going on in the county here. So I'm going to go through some slides. I just put together some quick photos this morning just to kind of show the pros and cons or what are going on specifically today. As most of you know, there's not been a lot of snow this year. So we're in an above drought condition. It's pretty scary. So I'm just going to roll through some photos. This is one of 4 high tunnel greenhouses that we have. This is our 100-footer. And this is taken in the spring last year. We got our tribal blue corn coming up and our tribal peppers and tribal squash in the back and tribal watermelons. So this is kind of the new go-to, is trying to get everything in drip irrigation. Trying to work with our state and local agencies to get funding our way to start to implement some of these water conservation and IWM practices that will help us carry through in these times of drought where we might not have any water coming our way. So.
And Spring, can you say what IWM means?
Irrigation water management.
Great. Okay. You want me to head to the next slide?
Yeah, definitely.
Is that coming through?
This is awesome. I think one of the questions you had was, I can't find it right now, but it's kind of like, what did it look like when you started? We bought, it's a total of 6 acres, but we have 3 acres of farmable land down below and 3 acres up top. But we bought this land fallow. It hadn't been worked for probably 20 years. And the picture on the right is me standing there the day we bought it with a field of cheatgrass and a variety, a salad of noxious weeds. And within days, we had the neighbor across from us is Bend Distillery. So Parker brought his tractor over because we didn't have any infrastructure yet or implements, and tilled it up. I went down and got 100 pounds of cover crop seed, and immediately I think this first picture is in May. The second picture might be in August. I can tell from all the smoke. But there it is. There's that cover crop, soil restoration, carbon sequester, like the whole cycle. I wanted to just get in there and get something going. Let's get some amendments in the soil, natural fertilizers, increase the CO2, the carbon, nitrogen. So there's a variety of cover crops. There would be peas and oats and clover. So that was one of our more successful attempts at cover crop before we started laying down actual rows irrigation. The place came with a few pipes, but we took out a big FSA loan and acquired more infrastructure. So this is kind of what it looks like when you start, when you buy land from the very beginning or acquire it through leasing. This is Central Oregon. It's just full of noxious weeds. There's 2 acres right there of, the weed salad. So a lot of challenges, I think, as soon as you get land, I think the first thing you should do is work on that soil and know that things take time. We're on year 4. The soil, I'd say, is like 40% of health of what I wanted out there, but we're working with volcanic sandy loam soils. So you can literally just blow it in your hand. So it takes years of bringing in compost, creating your own compost on farm, creating that plant material base to have a compost pile. We had chickens in the beginning, but the coyotes ate about 30 of them and the owls. So we're done with poultry. Good lesson learned. But yeah, this is just our first year. And this is the reality of what it looks like when you come in and start from scratch. Go to the next slide.
Yeah. Right.
So I'm only going to do like 4 more slides, but I thought we'd start with something positive because the rest is just kind of downhill from here with climate change issues. But this is the good stuff we do. We have on-farm education where kids of all ages come out. Sometimes they come out in the spring and plant something from seed. They come out in the fall and harvest it, take it back to their families, and/or it goes in the Bend LaPine School District. So yeah, the kids are outside. It's healthy, a new learning environment. They're learning about food, where it came from. We live on the highway, so they can always drive by and be like, I was there. Make those associations that are important. This is our last fall. We had a tribal long table, which is the equivalent of a farm to table, and had all the foods we grew on farm, all the tribal squashes and corn, pretty high-end couture style of cuisine where everything is tribal, local, and we have tribal chefs that we employ that come and present this beautiful setting for us. The next photo is us delivering a pallet of tribal food boxes and 500 pounds of free salmon to the Warm Springs Confederate tribe. This is delivered to their commodity food center, which is a whole building full of cans, basically, of canned food that and different commodities that the USDA or the government still provides our tribal people. So it's like we're still living in the 30s. So it was really cool to be able to grow this food all year. To the right is kind of a picture of one of the boxes that we give. So it's just nice to show up with the real food that's familiar to those people. And it just makes it healthier. Food is ceremony in our culture. So having salmon right off the Columbia River and all these locally grown tribal foods in these boxes. And then we have our shelf stable products too that last all year round. So that's the pro to having a unique farm like ours is traditional people are accustomed to saving our food and preserving it throughout the year. So we're just sticking to that old cultural way. So this is some of the good work we do. We also have like 40 national accounts are all tribal. So 90% of a lot of our foods go to tribal people, which is pretty unique too. We sell stuff locally. We're in market of choice now, our hot sauces, which is pretty cool. And we do a lot of teaching and education. So this is the good part. Enjoy it. And the next few slides are, it can come off as negative, but it's the reality of what's happening with new farmers, existing farmers, future farmers, young farmers. It's climate change. It's something we have no control over. There's not much we can do about it. But these are the pictures of what's happening. So it shouldn't be negative. It's just realistic. And the main thing to take away is what are we learning from it? We learn from the things that don't work. And it's very successful because it helps the community around us figure out how we can work together. The picture on the left is no water last year. That is one of our irrigation canals that had dried up when they literally just shut the water off. It's pretty sad. The middle picture is from a massive hailstorm that came in and flooded our property. So we have these like high weather events, high intensity weather events that come in and either like there's massive wildfires, there's really high winds that'll knock buildings over and destroy greenhouses and high tunnels and row cover. And then we get these flash flood events where you know, you'll get I think that's 6 inches. In some spots it was up to my knees there. So I obviously went in and grabbed a beer and was just assessing the damage. I was really stressed out. But yeah, we've got these crazy events. And then you guys are used to the wildfire smoke, the picture on the right, where I think this was the year before last when we sent everyone home and we just worked outside with masks on. It's not appropriate for anyone around the state to be working in that, and they still did. So I'm feeling bad about that, but we don't allow our employees to work outside. Today it's 5 degrees out. They're all at home. We just really want to take care of our people because we need them to be around after these events move through quickly. So this is kind of slide 1 of the natural disasters.
Yep. And again, folks, if you have questions and want to talk as we go through these, please feel free to stuff in the chat.
Oh, actually, I think you're breaking up a little bit. Just heads up.
Bring out
At least I'm there.
Okay.
This next slide is, you know, more pictures. This is that beautiful green sky that you see in the Midwest that kind of comes in hot before it lands. This was a massive hailstorm that came 2 years ago and like destroyed all the buildings, cars, greenhouses. Everything's been completely replaced. It was our first year farming or second year farming. The third picture over is the size of the hail, so you can imagine the damage that it did, not only to infrastructure, but to the plants. Just completely wiped out all the plants. And FSA would not cover any like hail damage because we had too many varieties of crops. They're like, if you had just a bunch of soy or corn, which doesn't really grow that well here, we could cover you. But having 140 varieties of these specialty tribal plants, no. So that's, I'm sure we'll talk about funding later, but that's just kind of the reality. There wasn't small crop insurance either. I think there is now, but we've all been too busy, you know, working on these photos to kind of sit down and do more paperwork, right? The picture on the far right is our soils. It's volcanic ash, basically, moon dust. So it's really tough to keep that healthy. Aerated, it leaches pretty quickly. So as soon as you water something, it just drains right through it. And then we found out yesterday, this is a updated map from, that's our, like, to the day, what our water resources and allocation is going to be. We pull from Crescent Lake and we're only at 9% for the year. So they sent us a letter, our irrigation district yesterday, notifying us that we had 2 options, either to get water or they end water in August or like all the way, which is the height of our growing season for actually something finish being produced. Or in September, they're going to give us week on and 2 weeks off. So that doesn't work either. Very scary. That's never happened here where we're working off of 9% of a reservoir. You know, I don't have the data on how many farmers are here that are actually growing food, but, you know, around 100 maybe. More specifically, probably about 10 that are actually putting it, you know, on the ground in people's mouths through markets. But yeah, it's pretty scary. I don't know what to say. We're just gonna have to see what happens the next few days. We're all gonna try and get together, hopefully, and come up with a plan, or maybe just have a memorial service over beers and burgers or something. I don't know, but this is reality of what's happening out here. I'm anticipating a significant increase in wildfires this year. So there's a lot of things that go along with not having water. So that's just one of a few bad slides that I have to show you. We'll go to the next one.
Okay.
Yeah, this might be the last one, but this is kind of the goal. I mean, this was a few years ago. This is all we want, is to have this picture happen again, to have all these beautiful traditional plants growing. There's your hedgerow right there. It reduces, you know, not just weeds, pollution, wind. It's a really nice barrier from the highway. It's pollinator. That's a really good example of a hedgerow, by the way. That's not a berry or a shrub. But this is all we want, is to grow the foods, make a profit of any type, be able to pay our massive farm loans, and just to feed our people in our community here. I think that's what all the farmers want, is to have healthy soil, but you can't have healthy soil until you have water to grow those natural plant materials to create that organic matter, right? So this is the goal, is to get back to some color and production. Like there's an area on this photo at the top where it's bare soil because we just did a massive harvest and we're getting ready to put cover crops down. So it's constantly rotating those cover crops, having water to put on there. It's going to be impossible to do drip irrigation on 2 acres, but it has to happen at some point. We can't use overhead sprinklers, hand lines. There's people that have K lines out there. There's still flood irrigation existing. I don't know, this should be illegal, but I understand its function when you have different farming styles. So I'm not super, opposed to it, but I think we need to change our ways of water delivery, specifically here in Deschutes County, where it's very, very dry. I think this is my last slide.
Yep.
But if anyone has questions, feel free to fire away. I know that Ashley has, Ashley has some questions too, but let me know if you have thoughts or comments, and I'm just here to help and see how everyone else out there is doing, if they need anything, if they're having any struggles, or and maybe solutions, and of where we go from here.
Yeah, so folks feel free to add in some questions. When you were talking about the hedgerow there, and that last slide, Spring, were you talking about the sunflowers, like at the?
Yeah, we have, we just did a 10-foot deer fence around, that whole acreage up front there. Mm-hmm. And we also have 4 greenhouses on the other side of the property, but now that it's fenced, it's easier to create this, I call it the tear down, where you put these tall flowering pollinator plants. They could be perennial or annual, or it can be a cover crop because the peas get really tall. So does the rye. Oats, everything gets really tall with water, of course, but I kind of like to tear it down where first it blocks all those noxious weeds from blowing in, like thistle, tumbleweeds, cheatgrass seed, a lot of those airborne seeds. And it functions as a pollinator, a windbreak. And then as you tear down, it provides shade cover. It improves the temperature of the soil too. It keeps it cooler for those lower growing plant materials. I think it was sunflowers, bergamot, bee balm, and then yarrow. And then we went down to some low growing cover crops that were getting, they're like a different kind of buckwheat. So it was this beautiful color of flowers, all pollinators. We have bees, like 2 hives in the back. Kept all the weeds out, keeps the air pollution out too from the highway. So it just has a ton of function to provide this kind of wall that tears down. And then it kind of helps go along with how, remember the heat dome we had last year? It kind of keeps that soil cool. There's no shade around here. It's just wide open heat. So having any kind of shade at any time of the day really helps kind of keep things temperate a little bit.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Do you folks have any questions they want to bring, or some things they're experimenting with that have come up as Spring's been talking?
We have a question actually from Heidi, who's on the call. Heidi submitted this question on the registration form, but asking, how are you calculating irrigation needs for crops? I think specifically now, knowing that water will be so scarce this year, have you found ways to reduce water use on your farm?
Yeah, what we did last year when they cut the water in half and then just kind of cut it off is we just stopped growing in certain areas. So there's crop loss. That's a good way of managing your irrigation water efficiency. The other way was we're trying to still switch to all drip. We've installed an overhead drip system that should be coming here pretty soon from High Desert Grant, where that'll allow us to keep our plants cooler. So they're not getting burnt as much. I think we're going to have some other issues with pests with that too. But the way that I measure it is just what the plants tell us what they need. It's kind of old school native, but we always look at the plants and they tell us how healthy the soil is by how tall they grow, the way they grow. A lot of them were stunted in the last few years between the smoke, mold, pest increase, a lot of heavy weed pressure last year, and that heat dome on top of all that. So our traditional way of looking at things, because we are still waiting for some NRCS funding to get weather stations, more drip irrigation, water and soil sensors. We're waiting for that technology to arrive, and it might not now till the fall, and that's just going to be way too late. But the way that we manage our water is just by what the plant tells us, what crop production looks like, and just simply putting in drip irrigation, or just not watering at all because there's nothing to water with. So
I've got a quick question, Ashley.
Please.
Hi everyone. I'm Zach Mankini, he, him, Campfire Farms. Wondering if anyone has or best practices or kind of lowest hanging fruit, if you will, on improving soil water holding capacity, short of like massive amounts of compost, I suppose. But that strikes me as a way that this could, increasing the in situ storage capacity is, but I just don't know how to do it on any kind of scale.
I don't know either. We just talked with NRCS about that. I think they're going to give us some compost funding, a few grand, but it's very costly to come in and wood chip stuff. Then you have leaching, it creates more of an acidic soil substrate there. I just use cover crops and plant materials. This year, I think we're going to plant, I don't know how it's going to work, but it's a really cool option. So let's say we have a row of plants, and instead of the row that you walk on, I think we're just going to put oats or rye there to provide shade below and keep that soil temp down and water, like evapotranspiration rates lower. I don't know what else to do. I mean, going in and throwing a bunch of compost down that's going to get really hot is going to burn the plants next to it too. I mean, it was 90 plus degrees here for 3 or 4 months. It was crazy last year. And I think that's going to happen again. That's all I got on that one. I don't know.
Yes. So, I mean, increasing soil organic matter broadly through what, whatever, however you can. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I don't know. I don't want to put plastic down. I mean, that's going to get hotter. It's costly. It looks horrible. It's wasteful. I think the cost for anything petroleum based or a byproduct is going to accelerate through the roof in the next 30 days with the cost of fuels going up through the roof. So I think the only way we're going to keep our soil healthy and cool and keep those evapotranspiration rates down would just be to create more shade.
There are some compostable, like they're corn based, they're bioplastics that are certainly a lot more expensive, but may tick a few other boxes. I've never used them. I'm not advocating for them, but your mention of plastics just brought that up for me.
And Pam, you mentioned that you're using some biochar out there. Is that, you want to speak a little bit more to that?
Yeah, we have some forest acreage. And so we started making biochar. We're trying to reduce a lot of our fire risk. So we're taking a lot of stuff, cleaning slash piles and stuff like that, and converting it into biochar. It's labor intensive, but it's a great product. And then we have some giant compost piles. So we've added a fair amount of it into the compost, because otherwise when you first put it in, it can leach a lot of nutrients from the soil. So if you put it in compost or something first, you can do that. And supposedly, so that hopefully that will hold water in the soil. And I was just visiting a ranch in Central Coast. I was down at Tomcat, and they're actually putting biochar in the salt for the cattle. So I don't know if you don't have cows, that doesn't really help. But then it really is increasing the microbial activity in the dung. And so then that's awesome. That it breaks down faster, and then you're getting that organic matter into your soil faster.
Yeah, something we do a lot of traditional tribal burning here on the property to increase wildlife habitat, reduce fuels reduction. And we do that too, where we put it in the compost pile. But one of the tricky things is it always seems right around the time that the water comes on, which I think is April 18th, they put the fire ban on. So right now we're having this wild weather, this wild, wild west where it snowed yesterday, like maybe an inch over 24 hours. It's already gone. But now the ground is too wet to burn something. So then once we go through these cycles where now our winter is coming later and later, but it's not really winter, it's pretend moisture. And it's getting harder to burn and control your fuels to create a biochar or, reduce noxious weeds or fuels issues because there's juniper all around us. We can never catch the window of the fire ban coming on and the fake moisture kind of controlling itself. So there's that too, like where you can't even do traditional practices. We'll be burning our sweetgrass beds here in the next week, but we're hoping it dries out enough too. But then we're like, we need water. So it's kind of always one of those balances of being an organic farmer, using native traditional practices, dealing with rules and regulations. There's always something where you just can't like charge ahead,
I was just curious why, so we're burning today. We're just burning in the snow. And
we're not burning. We're trying to burn in the next few days ground cover.
Okay.
We're trying to do like plant restoration. So it's wet still. And it's windy. So if it's windy, we can't burn because this whole place would nuke up. So our neighbors, everybody. So it's partial that it's windy. The soil, I don't want to blow through a bunch of fuel that costs twice as much now and stand there when it's wet. There's a 60% moisture content in that plant material. I'd save at this point a time of day. So.
Does anybody else have any questions they want to bring up right now? Or Dominica, maybe one of the other questions that Spring didn't touch on?
Yeah, we do have a question about choosing hedgerow plants. And I saw that you had a beautiful hedgerow in your picture. And yeah, if you could just explain a little bit more on the benefits of having hedgerows.
I just went through that with like winds. It reduces noxious weed, plant material, and seed, airborne seed from coming in. It increases wildlife habitat in areas where you kind of want to balance having a farm and wildlife habitat. Pollinator increase. I can't think of something it's not good for. And we just use a variety of annual cover crops to do that because the seed today is not that costly and you can turn it. So you're constantly creating this organic material for the soils. You're increasing pollinator habitat. There's people that own bees on farms all around us. So I've seen other bees come in from across the street and I'm like, you're cheating. You're using our crops instead of your own oat crops across the street. And you can tell when they come over that they have different colored pollen on them from different flowers. It's really cute. But I think just burning through your cover crops, I've noticed here having native plant perennial shrubs as a hedgerow has its pros and cons. They take longer to establish, especially now that we don't have a lot of water to get them up and going. Native plants often take 2 to 5 years to get really established, even if they're watered. So I like to have things because we're still trying to build up that soil base a little bit and get that organic material in there. So I'm using native plant hedgerows more on the eastern side of the property, on this cliff side that we have, that will work as erosion control too, for when those we have those flash flood events where the hill starts to erode and comes right down into the greenhouse and starts wiping out that plastic material. So we're still on like year 2 or 3 of doing native plantings and hedgerows. So that native plant can do its job as it functions as a filtration system.
Nice, that's really helpful. And as you've been talking about, this really dire water situation that you guys are facing this year, I know that last year you had a hard water year as well. And just kind of curious how you decided to pivot last year, or if you did, and how you kind of adapted when you heard last year what the water situation was going to be like. I know this year is kind of taking that to an extreme level, but just curious how you managed that last year.
I mean, we just were like, this is the only option, it seems like, is just to go to drip. There's still a whole 2 acres that's on hand lines, like sprinkler sets. So we're working with NRCS right now to get that whole area converted to drip, but they're backlogged until the fall. So we're not going to get it. And I think we might just go take it out of pocket and do it. But it's just one of those things where it's like, that's the only option. When you start turning off your water all the way to areas of your property, first of all, it's crop loss. Second, it's a waste of our traditional native seed that we don't have a lot of quantity of anyway to just throw around. It's not like a 50-pound bag of cover crop seed. And also there's huge fire risks that come with shutting that water off. As soon as you turn that water off, there's a whole section of your property that goes bone dry. We're surrounded with neighbors that have waist-high noxious weeds because they don't take care of their property. They're flipping houses right now. That's their focus. So then it's a fire hazard. So then we're like, how far can we get the fire hose from the pump in the pond, an acre or 2 down to hose it down if there's a fire that comes? There was a lot of fires that came through last year where there was ambers coming from sisters or the Camp Sherman fire. And we're like, oh my God, like they're burning holes in the greenhouses. They're landing on like fresh shellacked or stained decks or tables we were working on. It's like constant combustion just waiting to happen. So that's the indicator that tells you, like, shut the water off. Let's get it on a drip. Let's reserve any quality and quantity of water that we have to put a fire out or to throw a bucket on something if something happens. So
yeah. And from where I sit looking at, getting to know your operation a little bit, it also feels like the diversity of crops that you have, the kind of shelf stable products that you create, it is somewhat of a buffer potentially as you're going through these fluctuations. Does it feel like that to you, or do you think about it in that way? Like an economic buffer?
it does. Oh, definitely. I mean, that's what keeps us going, year round. And that's something that I think some of the farmers and I are going to try and have a talk about. Is there are farmers that's their sole income, but I would say 99% of them have privileged farms where they've been given land, given all the funding for the infrastructure. Just here's some funds, start your farm. And of course, they're going to be affected too when the water shut off. But I think the other people who aren't as privileged or more BIPOC farmers tend to use their creativity and resources by making other value-added products with that plant material. Instead of selling a zucchini for $1, you can dehydrate it, season it, put it in a package and sell it for $5. I mean, it just sounds smart to do, especially in these times where we went through COVID and there was a food shortage. Now there's the fuel increase where people aren't they still have to go get their food, but can they be wiser about getting it more locally? There's farmers here that are driving 40 miles to put their food in a farmer's market that I can't get into that's 1 mile away. And I'm the local farmer. So it's this kind of holistic approach where we're all going to have to figure out how to kind of tighten the reins a little bit with fossil fuels, driving around, saving funds for that, really making an effort to purchase more local foods. And the farmers are going to have to figure out how they're going to sustain that income now. A lot of the women that farm have other businesses too. So they're going to have to go be crafty and supplement now. I mean, that's something we just found out yesterday. So it's difficult to figure out how we're going to subsidize that farm. If you're taking out like $250,000 in farm loans to get all this infrastructure set up, and then there's no water, how do you pay those farm loans? when you commit yourself to just farming only and not living off a trust fund, it's pretty terrifying. And that's something we haven't even swallowed yet or processed. And it happened like, 24 hours ago, basically. So
Yeah,
I think,
that's a lot.
I don't know how the answer is to that. I teach a lot. I write grants as much as I can. It's very competitive, but there's just got to be, I think the breaking point just hit where we're going to have to figure out what the next step is, because not only is there no income, but there's no food. So none of us need to be living out of a box or a can. We don't need to go backwards. So we need solutions at this point. So I wish I had something better, but I think
No,
just being
that's
creative,
helpful.
there's a lot of farmers that have switched what they farm too. They were growing all these beautiful, it was hemp or CBD, and now that kind of made its move. And then they were growing more medicinal plants. And now last year they were throwing everything into hay, and now there's no water for hay. So the farmers being creative about what they plant too, to kind of adapt with the climate that's approaching.
Yeah, and I'm curious for other farmers on the call, if you're kind of adapting your varieties or what you're growing as you're seeing, the different impacts of climate change, whether that be wildfire smoke or kind of extreme weather events. I don't know if Zach or Chunky's been silent a little bit on the call, if folks want to come in with some ideas or maybe some shift that hasn't worked for you too.
We certainly select for, we don't raise crops. We grow forage, but our products are pork and chicken for the most part. We certainly select among the pigs for heat resistance. But other than that, and we only raise specific poultry breeds that are a little bit hardier through the heat, but yeah, no great insight there.
And you've been shifting out of Christmas trees, right, into...
Yeah, when we bought the property, it was entirely Christmas trees, and we haven't replanted any of them. Yeah, that was a bridge.
Yeah. Hi, Chunky.
Hi. What I've been doing is I've been trying to adapt the seeds to the condition, using land-raised seeds. So I select every year those that are more drought resistant and disease resistant, and then replant only those for the next year. So I started that about 2 years ago. So it's doing well, because now I'm getting actually like larger carrots and large, because I did select for size as well, and larger cauliflower. And I find that fava beans so far seems to be okay, because you can plant them in winter. I like to do a lot of winter planting, or late summer, early fall kind of planting. So I shifted to doing a lot of winter rye, a lot of winter planting, cauliflower, broccoli, even some cabbage that you can kind of finance a little bit. So then I have water throughout winter. Well, it's still getting drier, but there's a lot more water then. Then in early spring, I start to get a lot of food coming online. Like right now, so I get quite a lot of cauliflower and broccoli. So that seems to help a bit. That's my experience.
Yeah, and Chunky, can you tell everyone where you're farming right now?
I'm near Brooks. If guys are where it is. We're kind of outskirts. Well, not really in Brooks, but unincorporated area. But the nearest town is Brooks.
That makes a lot of sense for the west side in particular. Are there any additional questions before we start to head out into breakout rooms in a minute from anyone? Or Spring, if you have something you want to touch on that we haven't yet? We've covered a lot of great ground. Heidi.
Hi, Spring. Thank you for sharing today. It's good to, good to listen. What are your planting practices, like direct seed transplant? Does that seem to make, have you noticed any differences in those? And are there some crops that, you do one or the other?
Oh, I direct seed all the cover crops. That's probably a no-brainer there, but the rodents. We have direct seeded carrots and radishes, and we have rodent issues all over the property. We've tried a variety of different holistic methods for tackling that topic. But I would say 99%, other than a cover crop or a hedgerow, would be everything is planted by seed. It is transplanted either in the greenhouse or out in the field. So we run between 40 and 80,000 plants annually.
Great, thank you. I'm just looking over our questions real quick to see if there's
I'm doing that too.
Yeah.
There was a question on the form, and I think we started to touch base on it a little bit, specifically around kind of experimentation and new methods and things like that. But somebody was asking, how do you find the time and the money to experiment with something that might be so risky?
How do we find the time? Well, we work every day of the year, all day long. So we make time, and the money is just out of pocket. You know, we just, as it comes in, we put it back into the farm. So it's kind of like today where we decided, you know, we can't wait for the $30,000 in NRCS money to come through in the fall. So we're just going to either take a loan out or just use our own money to go buy drip infrastructure, rent an excavator to trench the pipes, make them below ground versus above ground. So you just kind of do it, you know, that we don't have a trust fund. So we have a mortgage and about $250,000 in farm loans. So we just kind of just go for it. You know, this is our main source of income for both of us. So I don't have a good answer for that. I think most farmers do that, where you just, okay, this has to be done. You just go do it, you know?
You have a vision for what you're trying to accomplish and are working towards that.
And it changes. I mean, now that there might not be any water, it's like, okay, well, we're going to truck water in and we're going to get IBC totes, and we're going to get a permit for emergency drought domestic from our well. Like, there's all these things where we're like, this morning, between all the meetings and things I have going on, I got 2 seconds to talk to my partner about, like, okay, what are we gonna do about this? Okay, real quick, well, maybe we should do this. Okay, I gotta go. Like, it's just constant running around. But that's what we're trying to figure out now. The next step is, where do we get the water from? Is that bill gonna be paid by Oregon Water Resource Department through the state? Or, I mean, there's no quick way to get the funding in to get things ready in a month. So it's like, well, we'll just go do it, or, you know, we'll just go from there. But
yeah, no, I think that's a really important point, that with any of these climate disasters, whether it be water issues or wildfire, right? Like, it's happening in this moment. It's happening really quickly, and it's hard to manage that in the moment, right? But you have to. So it's like this give and take, and funding is always so slow to come through. Or, you know, this idea of trying to improve the way water is being delivered in Central Oregon, of course, came up last year. It's coming up in Southwestern Oregon as well. And you talk to some of these really great collaborative conservation folks who are really trying to do positive change, and they're like, oh, we'll be lucky if we can talk about that in the 2023 legislative session. And that feels like forever for me talking to farmers on the ground. And so what is that balance between, like, how can we provide short-term support and then that really matters, that's going to keep people in business, and then how do you keep that longer term, like, yes, we need to invest in that bigger systemic change too. That's just something we struggle with at OrCAN as well, even though it's not as challenging.
I think like one of the questions was, what contingencies or economic resiliency do you have in place for extreme climate events in terms of your income? I think this goes back to like community, our farming community needs to communicate with each other better, and it's really competitive here. So the more we can kind of, unbutton the tie or undo the tie a little bit and communicate about how we can all work together on getting water to each other now, we're going to be forced to. Like, there's this biggest, best farmer concept going on too, where they're the most popular farms or the best farms or the biggest farms, but there's 10 or 15 other small farms that are cranking out this highly nutritional food, super unique, different palate, instead of everything tasting the same. Like, all those people and components need to communicate better and kind of forget about the gold rush. The people on top need to talk to the people at the bottom and share those resources so that we can all successfully attempt to figure out how we're going to get food to everyone this year.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, that was my best answer, other than what do I have in place for these is like, I take naps, and there's always Instagram to help vocalize the need, communicate with other people through photos. Beautiful. I mean, the photo I have of when the sky was green before the hailstorm hit is gorgeous. It's a beautiful photo. And it just resonates with everyone, showing pictures, communicating what they need, because a lot of farmers live really far away from each other, and everyone else too. We don't always get a chance to visit friends and family. So just communicating is very helpful during these times of change.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really great segue into us going into some breakout rooms here, this communication piece. Thanks for that, Spring. Communicating is key, and we want to create some time for you guys to talk a little bit more in smaller groups. So I've put a Google Doc in the chat, which is some guidelines to the breakout rooms. And I found in some of these Zoom meetings, when you get swooped into a breakout room, a lot of times if you don't have some clear guidelines, it can be really quiet, or people are confused, like, what are we doing here again? We've been sitting here listening. And so this may be a little bit like over structured for what we need to do today, but I figured let's start there. And if you need to be more flexible, that's great. And it looks like, thanks for joining us, Diane. She just had to drop off. We'll put folks into breakout rooms until maybe about 1:10, 1:12 maybe. Oh, let me do a quick time check. Let me slow down for a second. Yeah, let's say just before 1:15, we'll bring you guys back. So when you go out into the breakout rooms, introduce yourself. If it feels comfortable, get someone to be more of a facilitator, just to go through the questions. I find it's helpful to have someone who, that's your job. And it'd be great if someone could take some notes. And then we've got some questions to start you guys off. What's the role of community in your operation? What do you want to see that's not happening right now? Let's generate some ideas for how we can move forward together to do things a little bit differently. And then where have you been finding, this is a question I really like, where have you found some answers to some of your toughest questions? I think finding resources is a big piece of things. And then, if you guys want to talk about other things, then that works too. Everybody, I don't know about you, but that went by really fast for us, that 15 minutes, which was great. We were just getting started on this question of what would you like to see have happen that hasn't? Did you guys get through that question in your group? Yeah.
Almost.
Go ahead, Spring.
No, almost. Yeah, we're getting there. So
Well, maybe we should make some time to hit that question. But would just love to hear a little bit more about what happened in your breakout rooms that you'd like to share. I'll say that community question was really a great one to start with, and was good to hear how everybody's thinking about that in different ways.
Yeah, as the note taker from group one, I'd be happy to share a little bit about what we talked about. So in our group, we had Pam and Heidi and Spring and myself, and went around, introduced ourselves. We had 3 folks from Central Oregon, which was great. So Pam, Spring and myself are all located in the Central Oregon region, and then Heidi representing OSU Small Farms. And so, yeah, we talked a little bit about Pam's operation. Pam is representing Pine Meadow Ranch and also Roundhouse Foundation. And basically, Pine Meadow Ranch is working in the community to trial maybe riskier types of practices to be able to then share their learnings with the understanding that, you know, they have the economic capacity to be able to do that, that it's not something, right, that is going to fully affect their ability to like put food on the table for themselves and things. So just you know, being able to do that for their community. They're working on some pasture restoration, and really their role is to help to figure out solutions that can be shared. And then going into the next piece about, you know, what do we want to see that's not currently happening right now? It was refreshing to hear that Roundhouse is doing some thinking about how they can help support small farmers who may not have like nonprofit status, really identifying the needs of the community right now, right? Water, land, infrastructure, things like that, to be able to ensure that the foundation is, meeting the needs of the community. Another thing that Heidi mentioned is that something that's not happening right now, or that she's been hearing through OSU Farm School, is the need for more stories of success for larger scale farmers. So like examples of organic farming that work and are scalable, so not all just very small. And so making sure that folks can see that it is doable. Also got into just kind of the barriers to be able to implement more resilient practices with like systemic barriers and old water laws and things like that, that those are like the systems that we're kind of confined within and not able to more easily like change. And so how we'll do that, we'll have to, I guess, maybe another call for another topic for a future call to how to make those changes, but definitely identifying that there are some issues there that are, you know, preventing us from being able to implement more resilience. In terms of where do we find answers to tough questions, is just it's great to have farmer to farmer circles like this to be able to talk with folks who are really knowledgeable and have the experience.
Thank you. That's really great to hear, especially about the experimentation that you're able to do there, Pam, and excited to see where that goes. Zach, would you mind going through a little bit what we talked about?
Sure, yeah, no problem. On the community question, Chongqi's farm is pretty unique in that it's an intentional community, but they don't use any fossil fuels, so that means their labor needs are high. Chongqi and Sarah, feel free to jump in here and correct me if I'm wrong on any of this stuff too. Okay, so yeah, our room was Sarah Cross, Chongqi Tan, Ashley, and myself. In my case, the community resilience piece was particularly important during the wildfires last year because we had a whole lot of animals and no place to put them. So after that experience, we established a very informal network of 7 or 8 livestock farms of similar size that could accommodate 100 pigs, for example, on kind of relatively short notice. So that's just a email thread that we would hope to never have to dig up again. But it's just folks that we have at least informally said like, yep, they could help, and we've obviously signed on to help them too. And hopefully that, yeah, as I said, that doesn't come up. Sarah kind of reiterated the need for labor and green jobs, and we also brought up that the importance of the kind of decentralized community connections related to our loose network of livestock producers. Like we're not in control of that or anything like that. It's just, yeah, anyone can message the list. Ashley mentioned that she could forge some connections with other organizations. In other words, who to call for what. And what do we want to see that's not happening right now? Should we get into that as well, Ashley? Or yep, okay.
Yeah. Sure.
John Key mentioned a network of regenerative like seed and crop sharing, so like both like inputs and outputs from regenerative farms, and Sarah through her work with the food bank, I believe, is doing some of that. I've been pounding this drum for a while, but just to bring it up again, I still don't understand what the best way to measure carbon in soil. I mean, I know organic matter is important, but that's a portion of the story from my understanding. So like, you know, soil health and you know, the many factors that go into that. What are the best practices for farmers like us to be measuring that beyond a simple soil test that measures carbon, right? So yeah,
that does remind me, Zach, that I met a farmer in the Tacoma area who's created like a soil health kind of plan for her diversified farm. I think she's on 25 acres. I don't know if there's livestock involved or if it's just diversified vegetables, maybe poultry. But she's done, you know, not a lot of people have put together the resources on how to measure soil health, how to improve soil health for smaller farms like that, even though that's maybe larger than some of the farms in our network. She's really into like peer-reviewed science and has really relied on the Organic Research Foundation papers and reports to kind of help build her soil health plan. So it's really fun, especially if you want to, you know, kind of geek out a little bit on some of the papers and stuff. And so I have that resource that I can share with folks to look at. It's pretty in-depth.
I'd love to know more.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Let's see, we have a few minutes left before we can close. Does anyone have any other burning things that they wanted to add right now before we maybe address one other question before we close? Go ahead, Heidi.
Ashley, just to comment on Zach, do you know if ODA hired a soil health specialist for Oregon? Is that split with NRCS? And is that something that person could, help farmers with?
I saw the job posting. I don't know whatever came of it.
I've got a little intel on that. They did hire, his name's Mike, and then he had a long last name, and I'll be meeting, Megan and I are meeting with him on Monday, so I can learn how to pronounce his last name. And yeah,
Wait, his name is Nick?
Mike.
Mike, okay, sorry.
Mike, yeah. And he just started in mid-January. He's got a really in-depth soil health science background. So we'll be meeting with him and better understanding what he's thinking about digging into, and hopefully providing some guidance about what farmers need from that role. So we're excited to partner with him and talk with him more about how can we really measure soil health in Oregon for farmers at different scales in an effective way.
Yeah, because I'd love to see that, like soil biology, soil physics, soil chemistry, all kind of, right? And it's all connected. It's all connected.
Yeah, great, Ashley. I look forward to hearing about that conversation. If you don't mind filling me in when you're through.
Of course. I will say he's funded by NRCS. That's the kind of the crossover is merely funding from my understanding. And there was a really fantastic person who he was going to be working with who has now moved to OWEB. So it'll be interesting to see, like, as a person just kind of diving into ODA with not as much support as maybe he would have had in the past, what he's going to be able to do. So we're hoping to, you know, connect him with partners to be able to expand the work that they're doing. And Washington is several steps ahead of Oregon in terms of coming up with the soil health plan. So hopefully we can connect him with those folks to maybe not have to recreate the wheel. That's the goal. Yeah. Well, we just have a couple minutes left. I want to give Spring an opportunity if you have any closing thoughts or ideas that you want to bring up before we close.
I don't. It's just really good to listen to everyone and have different solutions on the table, or attempts at solutions, or bring up, you know, there's things like Dominica was saying that have existed for a long time, some systemic things that need to change. And they've been changing slowly over the last few years. But I think wealth distribution is a big one. If you have it, share it. Reevaluate your role or position in the farming community. If you're doing really well and you have water and others have none, try and figure out how to distribute resources. There's an immediacy to that within the next week or two for some local farmers that we're trying to reevaluate how we're going to access water. So there'll be some dialogue and communication, I think, tri-county wise around here. But yeah, it's just really good to hear how everyone else is addressing these issues. And being resilient to me means a struggle. You know, it doesn't mean, like, I've heard the word economic resilience, and it just, I don't know if the word resilience needs to be attached to that, because they don't go hand in hand. Like, having money and being resilient seem like they're the opposite. You know, it seems like you don't need to be resilient if everything's on your plate, you know? So just kind of reevaluating the way we use our terms and who they're applied for and to. And I think Heidi made a good point too, of getting more resources on the ground for how we tackle soil health, teaching new and upcoming farmers how they can evaluate their soils in time of drought, water usage. So there's resources out there, but we're not quite there yet to have all that information ready in layman's terms sometimes for those who are new to farming. So that's kind of all I have for today. I'm open to listening or answering any other questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Spring. I really appreciate you taking the time, especially on, you know, the tail end of hearing such hard news about this year's water supply. So thanks for, you know, being willing to jump into this tough conversation. I really want to thank everyone who made some time to attend today. I really appreciate it. I know that everyone's schedules are full, so I really appreciate that. And just kind of in closing, you know, one of the things that I've really loved learning from Spring and working with her is generosity. She really shows what being generous looks like and what that means. And so thanks again for being generous with your time and really showing us the pathway to how we can share what we do have, because even if we don't have a lot, we have something to share, right? Or even when we're having hard days or feeling kind of maxed out and really tired, we have something to share, we have something to give, and we need to also be able to ask for help, right? And that's a really important piece, and OrCAN's also here for that. So I hope you see us as a resource and can reach out for help. We'll be sharing this recording, and I'm going to put together some more resources in that note stock that we started, and I'll share that with you all on our website. We are working on finalizing a date to have my brother's farm from Crestwell. We just posted a farm profile of them on the blog to have them do an evening time presentation in April. Jen Aaron will be joining us. I'm very excited on the 31st of March to do a similar conversation. I'll be sending out an evaluation form after this event so you can give me some feedback. We're experimenting here, trying to figure out how to put these groups together, how to make it work. Would love any and all feedback that you have. And appreciate the thank yous coming through. And I think that's it for now. Thank you all. Good luck with the rest of your day and with this upcoming growing season. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's good to see everyone's faces.
Bye.